Have you ever wondered what freedom truly costs? Not the kind of freedom you can buy with money, but the kind that chains your soul, the kind that leaves scars no wealth can erase. Isabella Marin had been sold, silenced, discarded, a forgotten girl whose eyes carried storms no one dared to name. And Damian Blackwood, he was the man who could buy anything. His empire stretched across continents, his fortune bought nations, and his name made the powerful tremble. But for all his wealth, peace had always been out of reach. When their worlds collided, something broke. He thought he was rescuing her, thought he was paying for her freedom the way he had paid for entire cities. Yet what Damian didn't realize was that freedom was only the beginning. Isabella carried a truth, a secret woven into her very being, that no vault of gold could ever contain, and when she gave it to him, willingly, painfully, beautifully, it wasn't wealth, power, or possession. It was something beyond price, something that would test his empire, his heart, and his very soul. Would you dare follow a story where money can buy chains but not love? Where power cannot silence truth, and where the cost of freedom might just be everything?
This is not a love story you've heard before. It is a tale of shadows and fire, where a girl stripped of her choices collides with a man drowning in his own power. Viewers, prepare to step into a world where skyscrapers hide secrets deeper than ancient catacombs, and where the glitter of wealth disguises wounds carved in silence. You will meet Damian Blackwood, a billionaire feared for his ruthless empire, yet haunted by an emptiness money cannot fill, and Isabella Marin, a young woman whose freedom was stolen before she even knew what it meant, carrying a secret she does not yet understand. When he buys her freedom, it should have ended there, but it doesn't. That act awakens a chain of revelations that neither of them can escape. This story promises moments that will leave your heart racing and your mind questioning. You will witness forbidden rooms in glass towers, whispers of betrayal echoing through marble halls, and truths that cut sharper than knives. Every time you think you've uncovered the mystery, another shadow will fall. And at the center of it all stands Isabella, fragile yet unbreakable, and Damian, powerful yet desperate, for once, to hold something real. Together, they will face choices that no wealth, no empire, no promise of power can buy their way out of. What you are about to experience is a journey of freedom and sacrifice, love and betrayal, and a truth so profound it could either save them or destroy them both. Isabella Marin's life had always been measured in walls. Walls of orphanages that kept her from the outside world. Walls of rooms where she was silenced. And finally, the iron walls of those who treated her as property rather than a person. She had long stopped dreaming of escape. Dreams only made chains tighter. Yet behind her quiet gaze lingered a hidden spark, a longing she buried deep. Freedom. Not just to walk where she wanted, but to breathe, to live, to exist without fear. Her story collided with Damian Blackwood's on a night when the city pulsed with cold rain and restless ambition. Damian, the billionaire everyone whispered about, lived in a tower of glass and steel that pierced the clouds. From the outside, his life looked perfect. Sleek cars, lavish estates, influence so vast that presidents and kings bowed when his name was mentioned. But inside, his world was a hollow cathedral. Every deal he made filled his accounts yet emptied his soul. He had bought everything: art, companies, power. Everything except silence for his own demons. Damian first saw Isabella at an auction he hadn't meant to attend. The room reeked of smoke, secrets, and power abused. Men whispered, laughed, raised their hands with wallets fat enough to command another person's life. She stood on the stage, pale as ivory, her wrists bound, her eyes lowered. But when she dared to look up, just once, her gaze pierced through him. Not begging, not pleading, just a storm contained in silence. He didn't think. He raised his hand. The room quieted. No one challenged Damian Blackwood. Not here, not anywhere. And in that single moment, her chains became his. The days that followed were unlike anything Isabella had expected. She was brought to his mansion on the cliffs, overlooking an ocean that seemed endless. The estate was vast, built of stone and glass, with corridors that stretched like mazes and rooms filled with echoes rather than laughter. To outsiders, it was paradise. To her, it was another gilded prison. Yet Damian never touched her, never demanded, never treated her as the others had. He only watched, as though she carried something he couldn't name. And he was right. For beneath Isabella's silence lay a truth she didn't dare speak. A truth that made her fear sleep. A truth that could burn Damian's empire to ash, or give him the one thing he had never been able to buy. The mansion was not quiet. It was haunted. Not by ghosts, but by silence that felt alive. Isabella Marin wandered its endless corridors, each lined with portraits of Blackwoods from generations past, men with cold eyes, women with guarded smiles. They seemed to follow her, as though measuring whether she belonged or was simply another shadow destined to vanish. At first, Damian Blackwood gave her space. He was rarely present, lost in boardrooms, meetings, and phone calls that stretched into the night. When he was home, he lingered in the library, a vast chamber with ceilings so high they seemed to swallow voices. He would sit with a glass of whiskey, eyes fixed on the fire, not drinking so much as waiting for answers the flames would never give. Isabella noticed something strange about him. For a man who had bought her freedom with the sweep of a hand, Damian never asked for gratitude. He never spoke of why he had intervened at the auction. If anything, he seemed reluctant to even look at her, as though she reminded him of a truth he was not ready to face. Yet the mansion itself told her things he never did. Locked rooms that staff avoided. A wing of the house shut away behind heavy doors. And late at night, when the storm winds rushed against the cliffs, Isabella swore she heard music echoing faintly from somewhere deep inside. Music too sorrowful, too human to come from empty halls. One evening, curiosity overcame fear. She followed the sound, her bare feet silent against marble floors. The music led her past the gallery of portraits, down into the east wing, the wing no one spoke of. Her fingers brushed the door, cold iron against warm skin, and she hesitated. But before she could turn the handle, a voice stopped her. Not that way. Damian stood in the shadows of the corridor, his expression unreadable. He wasn't angry, yet his tone carried weight. A warning carved from experience. "I heard something," Isabella whispered, uncertain why she felt the need to defend herself. "You didn't," Damian replied simply, moving closer. His eyes caught hers, dark yet searching. "Some doors aren't meant to be opened." He walked past her, placing a hand on the door for only a moment before leading her away. But as he did, she noticed something, a scar along his wrist. Faded but deep, as though once upon a time he had fought against chains of his own. That night, Isabella lay awake in her room, her mind circling his words. Some doors aren't meant to be opened. But what if the door wasn't keeping her out? What if it was keeping something else in? Days turned into weeks, and Isabella Marin began to notice the patterns inside Damian Blackwood's world. Servants moved with quiet precision, never speaking unless spoken to, and always careful not to linger in the east wing. She tried asking once, a simple question about why those rooms remained locked. The maid froze, her face pale, and whispered, "We don't go there." Nothing more, nothing less. Damian, too, carried his silence like armor. He was a man who owned empires yet avoided his own home. Isabella often found him at odd hours, staring out across the cliffs as though searching for something far beyond the ocean. There were moments, brief, fragile moments, when he looked human. When his hand trembled as he poured his drink, when his eyes softened as they passed over her. But then the mask always returned, steel over flesh. One evening, the mansion hosted a gathering. Damian rarely entertained, but this night was different. Wealthy investors, politicians, and strangers with eyes like daggers filled the great hall. Isabella, dressed in a gown Damian had sent to her room, felt like a fragile ornament placed among predators. She caught whispers as she passed. "Who is she? Why is she here? Another toy? A weakness?" Among the guests, one figure stood out. Victor Hale. Tall, sharp-featured, his smile was polished, but his gaze lingered too long, as though he knew more than he should. He approached Isabella with the ease of a hunter who had already chosen his prey. "You must be Isabella. Victor said, lifting her hand to his lips without asking. Blackwood has been hiding you well. She tried to pull back, but his grip was firm. I don't belong here, she whispered. Neither does he, Victor replied, his voice low, dangerous. Damian plays the part of the untouchable billionaire, but everyone has cracks. I wonder what yours are. Before she could answer, Damian appeared. His hand closed around Victor's wrist, not harsh, but enough to make a point. She's not yours to speak to, Damian said, his voice calm yet final. Victor smirked, releasing her. Of course not. But secrets have a way of finding their way out. Don't they, old friend? The word friend carried venom. Isabella felt the tension between them like a blade. Victor left with a smile that promised he'd return, and Damian stood silently beside her, his jaw tight. That night, when the guests were gone and the house grew quiet again, Isabella dared to ask him, Why did you buy me? Damian turned to her, his expression unreadable. For a moment he looked as though he might tell her the truth, but then he only said, Because you looked at me as though I wasn't a monster, and with that he left her alone, with more questions than answers. Little did Isabella know. Victor Hale's words were not idle threats. The past Damian tried to bury was clawing its way back, and she was standing right in the middle of it. The storm outside the mansion grew violent that night, waves crashing against the cliffs as though the ocean itself was restless. Isabella couldn't sleep. Victor Hale's words echoed in her mind, sharp and unsettling. Secrets have a way of finding their way out. Unable to stay still, she walked the halls, her bare feet brushing against cold marble. The east wing loomed before her once more, its heavy doors shrouded in darkness. This time, she swore she saw something, just the faintest flicker of light beneath the door, as though a candle burned inside a place that should have been abandoned. Her hand lifted, trembling, reaching for the iron handle. But before she could touch it, the sound came again. Not music this time, whispers. Low, rhythmic, like a voice reciting words older than the mansion itself. Her breath caught. She stepped back, heart racing. And just as she turned, she saw him. Damian Blackwood, standing at the end of the corridor, watching her in silence. His face was half-shadowed, unreadable, but his voice carried through the darkness. Isabella, he said, calm but final. If you open that door, you'll never be the same. And then, without another word, he vanished into the shadows. The morning after the storm, the mansion looked untouched, as though the chaos of the night had been nothing more than a dream. Yet Isabella Marin carried the weight of Damian's words. If you open that door, you'll never be the same. What was he hiding? Her days unfolded in strange rhythms. Damian rarely spoke. And when he did, his words were guarded, as though he had built walls even thicker than the stone surrounding his estate. Yet in fleeting moments, when his mask slipped, she caught glimpses of something else, a loneliness as raw as her own. But the world beyond the mansion was not silent. News spread quickly in circles where power was currency. Victor Hale had begun circling Damian's empire like a vulture. Rumors whispered that Victor was determined to destroy Blackwood Holdings, one acquisition at a time. And strangely, Isabella's presence was at the center of these whispers. One afternoon, she overheard Damian arguing with a man in the library. The door was ajar, and though she knew she shouldn't, she paused. You brought her here, Damian, the man's voice hissed. Did you think Victor wouldn't notice? I don't answer to Victor, Damian replied, his tone sharp. You don't answer to anyone, but this time you should have stayed away. She isn't just another girl. She's... The man stopped suddenly, as though he sensed her listening. The door creaked. Isabella fled down the corridor before she was caught. But her heart pounded with the half-spoken words. She isn't just another girl. That night at dinner, she studied Damian carefully. He ate little, his gaze heavy, his mind far away. Finally, she asked softly, Why does Victor hate you? Damian's fork stilled. His eyes met hers, dark and searching, as though weighing how much truth she could bear. Because he knows what I've lost, he said quietly. And he intends to take what little I have left. It wasn't an answer. Not fully. But it was enough to make her realize something. She wasn't in the mansion by chance. Damian had chosen her for a reason, and that reason was entangled with Victor Hale. and the east wing. She was beginning to suspect, held the key. The following week, the mansion was no longer quiet. New staff moved through the halls and preparations filled the air. Damian Blackwood was hosting another gathering. But this one, Isabella soon learned, was not for investors or politicians. It was personal. On the night of the event, she descended the grand staircase in a gown of midnight silk, chosen for her without asking. The hall glittered with chandeliers, the guests fewer but far more dangerous. She felt it immediately. This was no celebration. It was a negotiation, and at the center of it all was a woman Isabella had never seen before, Evelyn Crow. Tall, poised, draped in emerald satin, Evelyn moved like a queen in exile. Her presence silenced the room, and when her eyes landed on Damian, they softened with a familiarity that made Isabella's chest tighten. Evelyn knew him not as the world did, but intimately, deeply. "Damian," Evelyn greeted, her voice smooth as velvet, yet edged with something colder. "It's been too long." Damian's mask slipped, if only for a second. "Evelyn," he said, low, measured. "You shouldn't have come." "And yet here I am," she replied, her gaze flicking briefly to Isabella before returning to him. "You've replaced me quickly." The words cut sharper than glass. Isabella tried to look away, but Evelyn's eyes pinned her in place. There was no cruelty in them, only a strange recognition, as though she knew a secret Isabella herself had yet to learn. Later that night, away from the crowded hall, Isabella found herself alone with Evelyn in the gallery of portraits. Evelyn studied one of the older paintings, a Blackwood ancestor, severe and proud. "You don't belong here," Evelyn said softly. "Not unkind." "I didn't choose to be here," Isabella replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "No," Evelyn agreed, turning to face her. "But neither did he. Don't make the mistake of thinking you're free just because he bought you. Chains come in many forms, Isabella, some gilded, some invisible." Before Isabella could respond, Victor Hale appeared at the far end of the gallery. His smirk was sharper now, his voice dripping with amusement. My, all the pieces in one room. "How convenient." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "Damian's rival, Damian's past, and herself, the unknown factor." Suddenly, Isabella realized something chilling. She wasn't a guest in this game. She was the prize. The gallery's air thickened with silence as Victor Hale stepped closer, his footsteps echoing on the marble floor. Isabella felt trapped between Evelyn's sharp gaze and Victor's predatory smile, the walls pressing in like a cage. Victor's eyes lingered on her. "Do you know what he's hiding from you, Isabella? Has Damian told you why he risked everything to take you away from that auction?" "Enough!" Damian's voice thundered from the doorway. He strode into the gallery like a storm, his presence swallowing the space. His gaze locked with Victor's, a silent war raging in the shadows of their eyes. But Victor didn't flinch. He leaned close, his words sharp enough for Isabella to hear. "She deserves to know. The truth always comes out, Blackwood. You can't protect her from it." Damian's fists clenched at his sides. "Get out," he said, his tone laced with command, his power undeniable. Victor chuckled, bowing slightly, his smile poisonous. "I'll leave, for now. But remember, Isabella, chains don't break just because you want them to." He left the gallery, his laughter echoing long after he was gone. The silence that followed was suffocating. Evelyn's gaze softened briefly, almost pitying, before she, too, slipped away without another word. That left only Damian and Isabella. "You owe me the truth," she whispered, her voice breaking the tension. Damian's shoulders rose and fell, his jaw tight. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then finally, his voice was low, almost fragile. "The night I saw you at the auction, Isabella, I thought I was seeing a ghost. You looked like someone I lost, someone I swore I would protect but failed." His eyes darkened. "Victor knows. Evelyn knows. And now, they'll do anything to take you from me." Isabella's heart pounded. She wanted to demand more, to know who he had lost, why her face had awakened something buried deep in him. But before she could, thunder cracked outside, and the lights flickered. From somewhere deep within the east wing, the sound returned. Not whispers this time, not music, but a cry. A raw human cry. Isabella froze. Her blood turned cold. And Damian looked as though he had been waiting for this moment all along. "Stay in your room," he ordered, his voice cutting through the fear. But Isabella knew with bone-deep certainty that the mansion's darkest secret was calling her, and that whatever lay behind that locked door would change everything. The storm raged over Blackwood Manor, lightning carving the night sky into jagged shards. Isabella stood in the dim hallway, her pulse thrumming like a war drum. Damian's order, "Stay in your room," echoed in her mind, but the cry she had heard refused to be silenced. It hadn't been the wind nor the house groaning. It was human, desperate, alive. Her bare feet brushed against the cold stone as she moved, candle in hand, toward the east wing. Every step felt like betrayal. Damian had saved her, sheltered her, yet she couldn't shake the gnawing hunger for the truth. She stopped at the iron door. The cry had gone quiet, replaced by shallow, ragged breaths. She pressed her palm against the cold metal, her heart twisting. Whoever or whatever was inside was suffering. The sound of footsteps behind her made her spin. Damian stood there, rain dripping from his coat, his face shadowed but his eyes blazing. "I told you not to come here," he growled, his voice shaking with something between anger and fear. "Then tell me why," Isabella shot back, her candle trembling. "What's in there? Who's in there? Why does this place feel like it's alive with secrets you won't share?" For a moment, she thought he would lash out. But instead, his hand fell to the lock. His jaw clenched. "You'll never look at me the same," he whispered. With a heavy twist, the door groaned open. The room beyond was lit by a single lantern, casting shadows on the walls. And in the center, chained to the floor, was a young woman. Her hair, tangled and dark, fell over her face. Her wrists were bruised where iron shackles bit into her skin. But when she lifted her head, Isabella's breath caught. The girl's face was nearly a mirror of her own. Damian's voice cracked. "This is Elena, my sister. The reason I bought your freedom. The reason Victor won't stop haunting us. Because she's not supposed to be alive." Isabella staggered back, gripping the doorway for support. "What do you mean, not supposed to be alive?" Before Damian could answer, Elena's lips curved into a faint, broken smile. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it struck Isabella like a blade. "Because I died, years ago." Lightning split the sky outside, and the storm roared louder, as though the heavens themselves bore witness to the secret finally unveiled. The storm battered the manor, its fury rattling the windows as if demanding entry. Isabella's candle sputtered, nearly snuffed out by the draft seeping from the open chamber. Her eyes clung to the figure before her. Elena, Damian's sister, her own reflection twisted by chains and shadows. Elena's faint smile widened, but it carried no warmth. "You see it, don't you?" Her voice was a fragile echo, yet it held an unnerving certainty. "The resemblance. That's why he chose you? That's why you're here." Isabella's heart lurched. She turned to Damian, desperate for explanation, but his face was carved in anguish. "She's wrong," he said hoarsely. "I didn't bring you here to replace her. I brought you here because you were already entangled in this, long before you ever met me." Isabella shook her head. "No, I was just a prisoner. A number. You bought my freedom. You think Victor chose you at random?" Damian's voice thundered with raw pain. He saw the resemblance. "He knew what it would do to me. He put you on that stage not to sell you, Isabella. He put you there to break me." The air thickened, the truth unraveling like poisoned silk. Isabella's throat tightened. "Then why is she—" Her gaze darted back to Elena. "Why is she alive?" Elena let out a brittle laugh, the sound scraping against the stone walls. "Alive? No, sweet sister. I am a curse kept breathing. Victor made sure of that." Her words sent a chill through Isabella's bones. She staggered back, her candle nearly slipping from her hand. "Sister, what are you saying?" Damian's silence was heavier than thunder. At last he spoke, his voice breaking. "The experiments Victor began years ago. He used Elena as his first vessel. She died, and yet he found a way to keep her bound between life and death. When you appeared, Isabella, looking as she once did, I feared it was no coincidence. Elena's eyes, dark and fevered, locked onto Isabella's. He wants you next. Don't you understand? You're the continuation. You are the missing piece. The storm roared louder, shaking the manor to its foundations. Isabella's knees threatened to give way. No. No, this can't be true. Damian reached for her, but she flinched back, the betrayal too sharp. You should have told me, she cried, her voice raw. His hand froze mid-air. For a moment, he was stripped of all power. The billionaire, the rescuer, the man who commanded the world, standing before her not as a savior, but as a man drowning in secrets. I was trying to protect you, he whispered. But now, there's no going back. Elena's chains rattled as she leaned forward, her voice rising like the storm outside. And now, Isabella, you must choose. Walk away and doom us all, or step into the curse that binds us. The door slammed shut behind them with a deafening crash, though no one had touched it. The storm seemed to swallow the manor whole. Isabella realized with bone-deep certainty that her life would never again be her own. This was the point of no return. The storm outside slowly quieted, but within the manor the echoes of truth lingered like ghosts refusing to depart. Isabella stood frozen in the chamber, her mind fractured by revelations. Elena, Damian's sister, Victor's victim, the living curse, stared at her with hollow eyes that mirrored her own. Damian's hand hovered near hers, trembling with a desperation that betrayed the man who once seemed untouchable. Isabella, he said softly, I can't undo what's been done, but I will burn the world itself before I let Victor take you. His words should have steadied her. Instead, they struck like sparks against dry kindling, igniting the fire of her fear. And if he already has, she whispered, her gaze flicking back to Elena. Elena's chains rattled in answer, a haunting reminder that nothing was certain. Yet beneath her broken smile, Isabella saw something else, a plea. Elena wasn't only a victim, she was a warning. Isabella turned to Damian, her eyes filled with a new, unshakable resolve. No more lies. If I am truly bound to this curse, then hiding me won't save us. We face it, together. For a heartbeat, silence claimed the room. Then Damian's stern mask cracked, and for the first time, Isabella saw him not as a billionaire cloaked in power, but as a man burdened by love and guilt. He nodded, the weight of his secret surrendering to her courage. Beyond the door, the manor groaned as though acknowledging her choice. The storm had passed, but its scars remained etched across the night. Isabella knew that her life was no longer her own, but it was not lost. Not yet, because love had bound her to Damian, fate had chained her to Elena, and now, destiny demanded she stand against Victor and the shadows he commanded. And as she gripped Damian's hand at last, Isabella understood the truth. Freedom had never been bought. It had to be fought for. The battle for it was only beginning.